Here, let me put it in. Hello, Irvin. How are you? I'm sorry for the delay. But here we are, and I apologize. We just had some technical difficulties getting started, but we are ready to go. So, tonight's class is a time relevant, but it's also timeless. We're going to learn one of the more fundamental chapters in the Tanya. The Tanya, which is the book written by the first Chabad Rabbi that really teaches us the inner meaning of Judaism and the inner meaning of what it means to be a Jew and have a Jewish soul. So the book as a whole is a great classic in Judaism. But within the book, there's a number of chapters that are famous for the tremendous benefit and lessons that they have for everyone. And one of these classical chapters that has a very, very powerful lesson for our lives is chapter 26 in the Tanya. And it's also especially relevant when you'll hear the topic of this chapter. This chapter deals with how to deal with sadness and worry. And obviously, from the time that we're living in, it's something that's important to be able to deal with and overcome. So this particular chapter in the Tanya gives us the tools to deal with this in a very powerful way. So, having said that, let's dive in. So the chapter starts off with bringing a interesting parable. I don't know if anyone is a boxing fan or a wrestling fan, but the Tanya says like this: if you have two boxers, two wrestlers, and one of them is very strong, and one of them is very fast, who do you think will win the fight? So the Tanya answers, the fast one. Because although in life, natural abilities, natural strengths is very important, but even more important is a happy, upbeat attitude. And what the Tanya is saying, that even if you have all these natural strengths, but if you don't have happiness and positivity, you're not going to be able to use them. The Tanya is saying that you can get farther with a positive, happy attitude than you can get with even the most natural talents. And the Tanya is saying this with regards to giving lessons into being a good Jew. That's the context that Tanya teaches this. But the truth is, this holds true to everything we're going to do in life, whatever we're going to do in life, whether it's the path to being a good Jew, or the path to becoming a good boxer, as the example that the Tanya brings. Whatever it is, we need to be happy. We need to be upbeat, and it's a challenge. It's not easy, and therefore the Tanya teaches us a way how. And yeah. So again, it's not just to sort of, I guess, re-emphasize or put this in different words. Some people could think that joy is like, or happiness is one component of life, like meaning it's a nice thing. It's a nice part of being life, or even if it's something that you need in order to enjoy life. But it's not necessarily the crux of living life. What the Tanya teaches, though, is that, and the truth is, being happy is the most essential thing you need to do whatever you're going to do afterwards in life. It's not a side point. It is the starting point, if you will. It's what you need in order to be able to accomplish anything you're going to accomplish, whatever you're going to do with your life. Before that happens, you have to be happy. Joy is essential to life. That's what the Tanya teaches. Then the question is, how so? How do we accomplish it? So that's what we're going to learn. Two powerful tools we're going to learn today. Before we do that, I will share two stories that's, if you will, tie joy and happiness into our current situation. And they're useful. So they're good stories, interesting stories, and relevant. The first story is the story told. It's actually a parable. It didn't actually happen. It's not a true story, but it's a lesson, a parable told by the Chida. Chida was a great Sephardic rabbi, and he tells a parable like this. One time there was a great epidemic raging through a town, and there was a man, and he sees none other than the angel of death coming into town, riding into town, riding in with the epidemic to unfortunately to do his thing. So the man goes up to the angel of death and says, "Angel of death, why are you? What are your plans? What are you going to be doing?" And the angel of death says, "I'm planning on now slaying 5,000 people, and tragically." And the epidemic comes to town, and unfortunately people start passing away. And it turns out that 15,000 people tragically passed away. And after the epidemic was over, this man bumps into the angel of death again. And he says, "Angel of death, you lied. You said only 5,000 people would die, and 15,000 people died." So the angel of death answers, No. You're mistaken. I did not lie. I only killed 5,000 people. The other 10,000 people worried so much that they brought the disease onto themselves. Meaning, if the other 10,000 people that died, they would have been in a positive mind frame, I never would have been able to hurt them. But because they were worrying and sad, they actually brought the disease onto themselves. So that's the first story, very powerful story. The second story is that the Rambam was a great, I think we even mentioned him last week. The Rambam was a great rabbi and doctor. And he was the doctor for the king in Egypt, the king Saladin. And because of his prominent position, there was a lot of people who were jealous, and were jealous that the Rambam was the king's private physician and beloved physician. And they complained to the king, and they said, why do you have the Rambam? Why does he get to be the doctor? Maybe there's better doctors. So the king said, we're going to do a test. And here's how the test is going to work. The Rambam and the chief contender who wants to take over the Rambam's place are both going to prepare a poison. And this poison they prepare, they're going to give to the other. So each one of them is going to have to drink the poison that the other one prepared. And then they're going to have to prepare a remedy for the poison that the other one prepared. And whoever is able to, wins the test, is able to either, to prepare the strongest poison and also prepare the best remedy, that doctor is going to become the king's, will get to retain or receive the position as the king's doctor. So the other doctor went first and prepared this poison for the Rambam, and he gives it to the Rambam, and the Rambam takes the poison, and sure enough, he's able to prepare an antidote, a cure, and he survives. And now it is the Rambam's turn. And he gives the other physician a cup of seemingly clear liquid, looks like water. And the other physician drinks the cup. And nothing happens, no symptoms. He's not able to figure out what the Rambam put in the cup. But the other physician starts to worry. What's going to happen? What are the symptoms? How do I treat this? What's going on? When's it going to strike? And he's worrying and worrying and worrying. When the symptoms going to start? When am I going to know what's happening? How am I going to handle this? And a week goes by, and the other doctor dies suddenly. So the Rambam had won the competition, and they asked the Rambam, "What did you do?" And the Rambam says, "I never would have ever poisoned someone." So he asked the Rambam, "So what did you give him?" He died. The Rambam says, "I gave him a cup of water and nothing else." And he died from worrying about what's going to happen. So this is also a second story with a powerful lesson for now. And the lesson from both these stories, it's relevant for now, but it also has a general lesson for all of life. And the lesson is we have to be upbeat, that how dangerous worry and sadness is. So now, having said that though, I want to make a point, a caveat. We're not saying the Torah, the Tanya, and the Torah is not saying that there is no place for sadness in Judaism, in being a good Jew. It's not exactly the case. It's not true. There are specific instances and times in our life when sadness is warranted. The first, and most obvious, is mourning. When a person passes away, their family has an obligation to grieve, to mourn. So this is one sadness that the Torah itself institutes. Or for instance, not only on a personal level, but once a year we have a holiday or a commemoration called Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. And the 9th of Av is a day that's set aside to mourn the destruction of the temple and to mourn the exile of the Jewish people that happened 2,000 years ago. So here you have another instance where the Torah itself is teaches us that we have to mourn. So there is a place for mourning. But so if mourning is bad, if sadness is so negative, why would the Torah institute a place for mourning? So the answer for this is can be said in the answer is that there are specific designated times that's healthy and proper to mourn. And in these instances, when we do mourn, it's actually not hurting us and dragging us down like sadness does, but it's actually allowing us to heal. So, as a whole, like we've started off the whole class saying, sadness hurts a person, drags the person down, could cause them to get sick even, like we said. And we'll talk about this more later on. But when something truly tragic happens to a person, then the appropriate thing is to mourn that tragedy, and that allows in that proper time, and that allows through that mourning process, that allows the person to heal and become better. And that's what the Torah designates. So basically what we're saying is throughout one's life, sadness and worry hurt a person. But when something truly sad and tragic happens, then the appropriate response is to, in fact, mourn. But that will ultimately allow the person to become happy again, to become whole again, to, as much as possible, to rebound and to lift themselves up and become happy afterwards. The path to do this is through grieving. But again, this is a specific instance when we're mourning something tragic that happened to us. Likewise, so that's one instance when is a place for sadness. But the key is it's an instance. It's a specific time in response to a specific occurrence, not a lifelong theme. What the Tanya and the Torah is teaching is that in general, throughout one's life, sadness and worry are bad things, hurt a person. There are specific instances when it's appropriate. Another specific instance when it's appropriate is when we made, unfortunately, like all human beings do, when we make bad decisions, and what's called in Hebrew an aveira, sin, when we do something that we shouldn't do, and we mess up, not a innocent mistake. An innocent mistake, one shouldn't get upset over that. It's an innocent mistake. But there are times when we make non-innocent mistakes. We do things we shouldn't do, and we know we shouldn't do, and we do it anyways. So after such an event, it is appropriate also to feel bitter and to feel regret. But again, this is it's a positive step, because it's not sadness just to be sad. It's a bitterness that will allow us to strengthen the resolve not to sin again. And this will allow us to move beyond the sin through feeling bad about it and bitter about it, and move beyond the sin and resolve not to do it again. So here too, we have an instance of constructive sadness, or in this case, bitterness and regret. But again, it's not a theme. It's not a lifelong theme. It's not something that we could do all the time. It's a specific instance in response to a specific occurrence, in this case being sin, us doing a sin, that requires us to move forward, not to move forward, to regret, to feel sad. But that's not a lifelong theme from then on. It's just something that we need to do in response to the sin. And through, regretting the sin, and that will ensure that we won't do it again, that allows us to then move forward to positive, happy things. But again, the goal and what's necessary is to be positive throughout one's life. Just that there's, in response to a specific tragedy, not tragedy in this case, in response to a specific sin, we have to mourn in response to that. But again, it's just a step in order to get to the positive life. So we can say that this type of positive sadness and mourning is like darkness that helps us appreciate light. Meaning, after grieving, we appreciate the life we have. After grieving a loss, we're able to appreciate the life we have. And after regretting a sin, We're able to appreciate the living an upright life. So these two specific instances where the Torah warrants sadness, it's not like I've said before, it's not a end game. It's not an end of this, an end where we're sad and we can never get over it. But it's a step that could bring us to actual happiness. But like I said so many times already, but the goal is to be happy. That's what we have to be with our lives. That's what we have to. That's our default mode we have to be in. Now, what's the difference between the positive sadness, like mourning or regret over mistakes, and negative sadness? What's the difference? So the answer is like this. Positive sadness leads to happiness. Negative sadness leads nowhere. And that's a key thing. Positive sadness allows us, in the case of grieving, to heal. In the case of sinning, to regret and not do the sin again. And that allows us to then live positive, happy lives. Negative sadness leads nowhere. It just leads down. Negative sadness is actually rooted in laziness. There's a connection there. Depression is rooted to laziness. Why? Because laziness causes a person to just do nothing and to be lethargic. And negative sadness, depression, causes a person to also be lethargic. If the feeling that one gets from one's sadness is that I just want to go to sleep and run away from life, not move on from here, and do nothing, that is a sign, a clear sign, that this sadness is not a positive sadness like grieving or mourning or regret, but it's a negative sadness, the sadness that just drags the person down. And this is the sadness that causes the person to be lethargic and not want to do anything and not move on. This is a negative sadness that we have to overcome. And worry is the same way. Worry paralyzes a person. It's all in the same boat. And this is what we have to overcome. And this is what we need to move on from. And the question is how. So the Tanya brings two methods. The first one is a mystical method, and the second one is a practical method. So we'll start with the mystical method. The mystical method goes like this. The Torah teaches, and we believe that everything in the world comes from God. Nothing in the world just happens by chance. If something is happening to us, we can be sure that this is God's plan, and God planned it for us. And we also know that God is kind and God is compassionate. So seemingly everything that happens to us must be good and positive. So the question is, how could it be that all these hard things are happening to me that make me sad and make me worried? If everything is coming from God and everything is part of God's plan, how could it be that something saddening or worrying would happen to me? It seems to be impossible. Tanya explains that there's two types of goodness that God bestows upon people. The first one is revealed good that we're able to see the goodness. And whenever we have this in our life, Baruch Hashem, thank God. When we have revealed good, positive things, it's a cause for celebration, and we're happy, and we should be happy. But there's sometimes when God wants to give us a present, but it's too much for us to handle. It's too good to be revealed. It's a hidden present. Let me give an example to explain why would something be a hidden present. as human beings, well, the classic examples like this. When you give too much revealed good, human beings can't handle it. The classic example is a winning lottery ticket. Most of the time, when someone wins the lottery, which is such an open abundance of wonderful, the possibilities, most of the time, such people who win this incredible gift, it's too much to handle, and they don't handle it well at all. They can't handle it. Their lives end up blowing apart. And the reason for this is because it's too much possibility. It's too much goodness. So the same way, sometimes God wants to give us a gift, but we're totally unready and unable to handle such a great gift. So therefore, God has to disguise it, this gift, so we won't get blown away by it. And that's when God gives us, that's why, should I say, God gives us difficulties. That's why God gives us hardship. He's actually giving us goodness, but it's so much goodness that we wouldn't be able to handle it. So God has to disguise it as a hardship. And the classic example of this is sometimes when people get sick, it gives them a whole new perspective on life. So what actually happens is they're getting this incredible gift of God that they should get a whole new outlook on life. So the question is, why did God have to make them sick to do that? And the answer is because they would never be able to attain this new outlook through regular courses. So God has to send them a challenge that they can't handle. A challenge in order that they should be able to attain this good, in order to give them this goodness, because there's no other way of getting it to them but through a challenge. So that's the idea, that when God sends us something difficult, it's actually an even greater level of goodness, and this is the only way God can get us the goodness. So when we're going through something difficult and painful, and we have to say to ourselves that this is actually part of God's plan and part of God's good plan, meaning it's good for me. There's something positive there for me. And it's actually so positive that God had to disguise it in a negative way, because I would never have been able to handle it in the regular way. And when we take this approach and we embrace the challenge, and we don't get depressed and sad and worried over the challenge that God gives us, but instead we become positive about the challenges that God gives us, and we embrace the challenges that God gives us, and we celebrate the challenge that God gives us, this causes that the goodness within the challenge should be revealed. As a reward for us seeking out and believing in the goodness and the challenges that God gives us, God actually reveals the good in this challenge. So this is the first method that we have to take a saddening and a worrying situation and make it not allow ourselves to become depressed and sad and worried about it. How so? Through realizing that this is actually a good situation, and believing in that and celebrating that. And then as a result of viewing these negative situations as a gift from God, and not mourning them, and not being worried and sad about them, but instead being happy about them and celebrating them, that actually causes God to reveal in an open way that we should truly be able to see and understand the goodness in this challenge that God gave us. And this obviously takes belief in God and God's plan. So it's a spiritual path, but this is the first tool, spiritual tool, if you will, that we have to overcoming sadness, because we're always sad for a reason. There's something, not always, but typically that's the way things typically work. We're sad or worried for a reason. We have to take this reason and believe and accept that this is actually a good thing that God's giving us. And therefore I'm not going to be upset about it, but instead I'll be happy about it, because I know that everything is from God and everything from God is good. And when we do this in itself, that thought process in itself is a happy one, and then it actually causes God to actually reveal the goodness and the challenge that we got, and then we're truly celebrating because we're able to see and understand the good. That's the first tool. The second tool is a very practical one. It's basically saying to ourselves, we're going to set a time when we're going to feel sad and bad and mourn, and that will be our time to worry, and the rest of the day we're going to be positive. And when you give yourself that sort of space, if you will, that time where you're feeling a negative, sad thought, so you say to yourself, it's fine. There'll be a time for that. At the end of the day, there'll be 10 minutes today where I'll be able to feel that thought. But now I'm not going to think that thought. When you take this approach, this also allows us to move our minds away from a negative, sad, worrying thought. So when we get a sad or worrying thought in our mind, we should think to ourselves, okay, I'm going to think about this. I'll worry about this. But it's not right now. Right now, in the middle of the day, I have things I need to do. Now it's not the time to think about it. I'm going to remove this thought from our minds. When we get a worrying thought, simply to remove the thought from our minds and say to ourselves, I'll allow myself 10 minutes at the end of the day to think about this. So you don't say, feel happy. You say, I don't feel happy. You say, no. It's okay to feel worried, but just not right now. Right now is not the time to feel worried. So when you give yourself a designated time to feel sad or worried during the day, but you make the decision that you're not going to worry about it throughout the day. There'll be a specific time to do that. That allows you to move your mind away from these saddening or worrying thoughts. Like there's a story that was told that there was a great rabbi, and he was trying to escape the Holocaust. So obviously it was a very, very terrifying time. And people saw him that he was going throughout his day, trying to do whatever he needs to do to protect himself, but not without worrying. He looked serene. And I asked him, how do you do it? And he answered, no, don't worry. I'm also a human being, and I also worry. But I designate for myself 10 minutes a day to worry. So I don't run around the whole day worrying. I worry for 10 minutes a day. And the rest of the day, I don't worry. So I give myself this specific time to worry, but not throughout the whole day. And by giving ourselves a specific, say, if you want to feel sad and worry, it's okay. Give yourself some time to do it. It's not the whole day. That allows us to think about positive, happy things throughout the whole day. And those are the two methods that we have to overcoming sad and worrying thoughts. And I'll end off with a third point, or story, which brings out a third point. That King Solomon, he once went into the marketplace, and he asked a goldsmith, "Can you please make me a ring that makes me sad when I'm happy and happy when I'm sad?" It seems to be an impossible job. What type of ring is that can make you happy when you're sad and sad when you're happy? How could a goldsmith make such a ring? It sounds magical. And the goldsmith accepted the challenge. And the goldsmith went and he fashioned a ring. And on the ring he wrote the words, Gam Ze Ya'avor. This too shall pass. When you're happy and you're on the top of the world, remember, it will pass. You're going to fall off the top of the world. And when you're sad and you're in the dumps, remember, tomorrow will come another day. There are better times up ahead. And King Solomon admitted that this goldsmith had indeed created this magic ring. And it's important to keep this in mind, that wherever life is we're on a journey, and it's a temporary journey, and wherever we are, it's not one thing you can be certain, it's not going to last forever. When things are good, we should stay humble and realize that nothing, you can't hold on to anything forever. When things are sad and when things are down and things are difficult, we should remember that this also won't last forever. So we should all be happy, and although it's a trying time, but we should remember to stay positive and stay upbeat, and we'll get through this. Nothing lasts forever. L'chaim.